If you believe that God created the universe, then logically you've got to ask the question, who created God? And then you have to ask, who created the God that created the God that created the God that created the God that created God, and so on ad infinitum. If you ask that question, it shows you've immediately categorized God as created. So you're talking about a created God. Now you imagine if Richard Dawkins had written a book called The Created God's Delusion. I don't think many people would have bought it, because I don't need him to tell me that created gods are a delusion. We usually call them idols, incidentally. But you see, this question... This question is extremely interesting because it's an illustration of a question that already rules out the explanation that's most likely to be true. Because the Christian claim is that God wasn't created. So if God was uncreated, in the beginning was the Word, and I'm coming to your 3-in-1 now, and I'm bringing it in obliquely. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He already was. So the central Christian claim is, and in Judaism and Islam, of course, equally, is that God is eternal. So the question, by definition, doesn't even apply to him. If the central claims of Christianity are true, Christ rose again from the dead. You see, when we go through all of this discussion, normally in a secular context, the hidden assumption is death's the end. And that's why I said atheism is hopeless by definition, because death is the end. And for the vast majority of people in the world, in history, life has not been particularly happy. So there's no hope. God becoming human, incredible as it may seem, and dying and suffering, but then rising again, there is going to be a final judgment. And that wasn't a grim idea, it was a wonderful idea. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, did you notice, I didn't emphasize it when I read Richard Dawkins, he says there's no justice. But that's a horrific concept. I mean, just think of what that means. If death is the end, the vast majority of people who've ever lived will never get justice. They don't get it in this life, and there's no next life to get it in. And I put this to Dawkins directly in public, and he said, well, I work for justice in this life. And I said, so do I, Richard. That's a wonderful thing to do, but it still is the fact that there is no ultimate justice, so the terrorists get away with it. The people that stoked the folks into the gas chambers get away with it. Hitler gets cornered, he blows his brains out, he's got away with it. Do you really believe in a universe like that? Because if you do, you're essentially saying that your conscience that demands justice is an illusion.
In a society where we have access to many religions, how do we decide which one to follow?
Deciding which of anything to believe is on the basis of evidence. Just think of the three major monotheistic religions. Investigate the evidence. You see, there's a confusion about faith. Many people have accepted Dawkins' definition of faith as believing where there's no evidence. That's nonsense. Faith is an ordinary word. It's not just a religious word. It's an ordinary word. It means trust. And usually, I suspect that all of you don't trust either facts or people without having evidence, or else you're a bit silly. And your bank manager won't trust you with a loan unless you provide evidence of collateral. Isn't that true? We all know what evidence-based faith is, but somehow the word has been spread around by Dawkins and co. that faith is a vice because it's believing where there's no evidence. That's nonsense. That is blind faith, and it's very dangerous. It's so very easy to see that science, meaning the natural sciences, are limited in that they cannot answer the simple questions of a child. Where do I come from? Where am I going to? And what is the meaning of life? Science takes things apart to understand how they work, and I suppose to understand what they're made of. Religion puts them together to see what they mean. You can speak of the ethical foundations of science, but you cannot speak of the scientific foundations of ethics. Science doesn't tell you what you ought to do.